Today, we're diving into something called active recall. It's a science-backed learning technique that might just change the way you study forever. We're talking about how to study smarter, not harder. You know that feeling, right? We've all been there. You spend hours highlighting, rereading your notes, cramming like crazy, and you feel like you've totally got it. But then the next day, you're sitting in the exam, you look at the paper, and poof, your mind goes completely blank. It is so frustrating, and honestly, it feels like a colossal waste of time. But what if I told you there's a real reason this happens and a way better way to learn? So, here's our game plan. We're going to start with what I call the forgetting trap. Then, we'll reveal the brain's secret weapon to fight it. We'll get into why a little struggle is actually the key. Then we'll build your personal toolkit, and finally, we'll look at the solid science that proves this whole thing works. Let's jump in. Okay, so let's kick things off with the big problem every single one of us faces when we try to learn something new, the forgetting trap. Meet the enemy, the forgetting curve. This isn't just a theory, it's a well-documented scientific concept that shows how shockingly fast our memory of new information just fades away. Seriously, if you learn something new and then do nothing to reinforce it, you can lose a massive chunk of that knowledge in a matter of days, sometimes even hours. This right here is exactly why cramming for a test is such a terrible long-term strategy. But don't worry, it's not all bad news. Our brains actually have a built-in superpower to fight back against this curve. And we're going to call it the brain's secret weapon. And that secret weapon is active recall. Now, the idea here is simple, but it's a complete game changer. See, most of us study by trying to push information into our brains, by rereading, highlighting, watching videos over and over. Active recall flips that whole idea on its head. It's the process of actively pulling information out of your brain. It's basically like giving yourself a mini test, and that one little shift makes all the difference in the world. A great way to think about it is like building muscle at the gym. You don't get stronger by watching somebody else lift weights, right? You have to do the heavy lifting yourself. It's the struggle, the effort, the strain. That's what actually causes the muscle to break down and grow back stronger. Well, learning works the exact same way. That mental effort of trying to retrieve a memory is what strengthens the neural pathways in your brain, making that memory tougher and way more durable. So that brings us to a point that might sound a little strange at first, but it is absolutely crucial. Let's dig into why that feeling of struggle is actually the key to learning anything effectively. This slide just nails the core difference. When you reread your highlighted notes, your brain is experiencing what's called recognition. It feels super easy because, well, the answer's right there in front of you. You think, oh yeah, I know this. But be careful, because that's a trap. What you really want is recall, the ability to generate that information from scratch with no hints, no cues. That's true knowledge, and it only comes from that active struggle. The big danger of just relying on recognition is this thing called the illusion of competence. It's this sneaky cognitive bias where we trick ourselves into thinking we've mastered a topic just because it looks familiar. Active recall shatters that illusion. It forces you to get real and confront what you actually know versus what you just sorta recognize. So, if there's one thing to take away, it's this. If your studying feels easy, you are probably not doing it right. The next time you have to pause and really struggle to dig a fact out of your memory, don't get frustrated. Celebrate it. That moment of difficulty, that's the exact moment real learning is happening. Difficulty is the key. Okay, so we've covered the why. Now let's get practical. Let's move on to the how and build your very own active recall toolkit with 4 powerful techniques you can literally start using today. First up, we have the blurting method. This one is as simple as it sounds, but it is incredibly powerful. After you read a section of a book or your notes, just close it, put it away. Then, on a blank piece of paper, just blurt out everything you can possibly remember. Then, and this is the most important part, you open the book back up and, using a different colored pen, you fill in all the gaps and correct your mistakes. Those corrections are pure gold because they show you exactly where your knowledge is weak. Next is the questioning method. This one is all about transforming your note-taking from a passive chore into an active process. Instead of just copying down facts, you turn them into questions. So a statement like, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, becomes a question. What is the function of mitochondria? All of a sudden, your notes become your own personalized quiz that you can use to test yourself later. It's brilliant. And of course, we have the classic flashcards. But here's the key. You have to force yourself to say the answer out loud before you flip the card over. This helps you avoid that trap of, oh yeah, I knew that. To make them even more efficient, use a system like the Lightner method.
Basically, cards you get right get reviewed less often, while the ones you get wrong stay in a pile you review more frequently. It automatically focuses your effort where you need it most. And finally, for those really big, complex ideas you need to understand deeply, there's the Feynman technique. You pick a concept and you try to explain it out loud in the simplest terms you can, like you were teaching a little kid. The moments where you stumble or hesitate or start using a bunch of complicated jargon, those are the exact spots where your own understanding is weak. So you go back to the book, you fill in those gaps, and you try explaining it again until it's crystal clear. This is active recall at its most powerful. Now, to really supercharge all of these techniques, you need to combine them with spaced repetition. Instead of cramming all your active recall practice into one session, you space it out over time. When you review information at increasing intervals, like after a day, then a few days, then a week, you're sending a powerful signal to your brain that this information is important and needs to be stored for the long term. This is how you completely flatten that forgetting curve. Now, all this sounds great in theory, but I know what you might be wondering. Where's the proof? Well, let's get into the hard science that backs all of this up. So, back in 2006, a landmark study by two researchers, Roediger and Karpik, directly compared a group of students who just reread material with another group who were tested on it. The results were, well, they were stunning. The group that practiced retrieval through testing had vastly superior long-term retention. This showed that testing wasn't just a way to check for knowledge. The very act of testing was building the knowledge. And check this out. This chart basically tells the whole story. A huge review in 2013 by a researcher named Dunlosky analyzed 10 different learning strategies to see what actually worked. And what did they find? The techniques that most of us use, like rereading and highlighting, were rated as having low utility. And what was at the very top, with high utility? You guessed it. Practice testing, which is just another name for active recall, and distributed practice, or spaced repetition. The science really couldn't be any clearer. And just to really drive the point home, a 2011 study even put active recall head-to-head against concept mapping, which is another pretty respected active learning strategy. The results were amazing. Students who used active recall remembered way more material than the ones who spent their time creating these super detailed, elaborate concept maps. So, to wrap this all up, let's quickly go over the key mistakes you absolutely want to avoid. First, stop just rereading your highlighted text. It creates that dangerous illusion of competence. Second, when you get stuck, give your brain a minute to struggle before you look up the answer. That struggle is the magic ingredient. And finally, make sure you actually understand the concept before you try to memorize it. You can't recall what you never really understood in the first place. And that brings us to the end. The evidence is compelling, the techniques are pretty straightforward, and the potential to completely transform your learning is massive. So the only question left is this. For your next study session, which path are you going to choose? Are you going to fall back into those old passive habits, or are you going to embrace the struggle and make it an active one? The choice is yours.